Okay, so I wanted to talk about some permitting things and Senate Bill 7 and kind of put together just like some information I think that might be helpful as you're thinking about developing your wastewater plant. So if you're a developer or someone looking to expand on their wastewater plants, these are just some concepts how to potentially get some funding, establish your entity, as well as what will you have at the end of all that. So, what's the opportunity? Senate Bill 7, there's 2 billion available for different water reuse projects in the state of Texas. They're looking to essentially invest a lot more dollars into new water sources and reuse stuff. So think water reuse plants, desalination, aquifer, reservoirs, pipelines, things like that. It's going to be over the next 22 years. And one of the big advantages is these are very competitive interest rate loans. Some of them even may have principal forgiveness. It can help you recover costs for engineering, infrastructure, planning, and things to that nature. So they're right now, I think they're going to be putting out like $100 million per year, which is a big increase from the years prior. If you're a disadvantaged community specifically, I think there's opportunities to get grants on certain projects. You can fund a project from $500,000 all the way up to $5 million. Something to consider is you can actually use multiple funding. So you could come through Senate Bill 7 and the Texas Water Board and get some funding, and you could like match it possibly the USDA loan or something like that. Like I said, it's limited time opportunity. And right now, at the time of this recording, there was only 50 applicants going in the entire state. And we'll talk about mud formation later in this, but essentially, if you're wanting to get into this, you need to start setting up your entity 90 days before the deadline. So, are you eligible? So, I'm going to talk about some of the different users that can be eligible for this. Things like mobile home parks, if they have a nonprofit water supply corporation. So some mobile home parks don't have that. They're actually profiting, and some don't. So if you do, that would be an eligible entity, which is great because you can probably help offset some of the residential fee costs. Private developments. So think if you're going to set up a private development, you've got to establish a public entity. And that's where I was going to talk about MUDs, or special districts, which they call political subdivisions. What you'll need to do likely is work with a MUD attorney who specializes in this stuff. And there's like some ongoing costs associated with establishing those. You'll want to work with them to help get it set up for your project. One of the things to think about is you can actually enter into a developer agreement between yourself and the MUD you establish, and you're able to recoup fees if you're building a bunch of single family lots. You can recoup those wastewater tap fees back against your investment as well. So you could go in and set up a MUD, get a loan. The loan's funding the project. Maybe you had to put some money in. You can get that money out, and then the MUD can pay that loan back with those fees. And then industrial facilities, so reuse, desalination, trying to get additional water supplies. You may need to set up a partnership with your city, county, or another water district, and see if you're able to recover some costs there. So the couple of qualification pathways, kind of what I was alluding to, are MUD formation and special districts. You'll want to come in and create a recognized political subdivision by the Texas Water Board, and that will help you get access to those loans from Senate Bill 7. Just repeating some stuff through here, you can recover some costs through the developer credits and fees or tap fees. And you can tailor, like I said earlier, you can tailor these to bigger or smaller projects. So you could be coming in with a 40,000 gallon per day plant, or you might be able to be coming in with a 2 MGD reuse plant, a lot bigger, and coming through with a strategy like this. Kind of already talked about this, so I don't want to kind of go over, but if you're looking at you may want to look at partnering with your local municipality to see if you can work with them to get this kind of funding for their project. So, what are those things? I mentioned them earlier. The planning, the designs, if you need environmental reports, feasibility studies might be able to be financed, your engineering design, your preliminary engineering reports, your submittals to TCEQ. You can probably get your fees to the counties and stuff like that reimbursed as well for any development permits, as well as obviously the construction itself. You're probably going to have, and that was kind of going to the point, you may have to put up to 20% down from other funding sources on your project, which was why I was bringing up, if you're going to get tap fees recouped, you could recoup against that 20% and then come in, through that developer agreement, and then, pay the rest of this off through some of that other options. Like I said, interest rates are usually at or below, so it's super competitive. And if you're a disadvantaged community, you're likely to qualify for principal forgiveness. So, what are some phases to get your development? So I want to go through what would you do? Okay, so you've got your upfront engineering. You'll do your initial studies, feasibility, which are required to, for your application to submit not just to TCEQ for any wastewater plants, but as well as to the Texas Water Board. So they'll review it and they'll commit. They'll either have comments, they'll commit, they'll say, hey, you need to change some stuff, and they'll lock in their rates similar to like a mortgage on your house. If you ever put in for a mortgage, that you lock your rates 30 days out before you actually close. So once they get that approved, you can get more of your engineering and more of your planning costs reimbursed. They can start helping you pay for the construction, which some of the payments that they're going to release are going to be tied to milestones on the project. So for example, we got our mobilization done, or we've got the another one would be like we have all the site grading. Have we poured all the foundations? Do we have the yard piping done? Things like that. And then as those milestones are met, you get recouped, and they close it out, and you've got a closed out loan, and the project moves on and starts servicing the development area. I'm not going to go through this again. This was talking about payback credits, things of that nature. So I wanted to talk about some potential infrastructure you could think about adding on under this. These were just some ideas and some just rough costs that I came up with just to share. You can do just a basic irrigation setup. So we could come in and you could build you could have a wastewater plant that has a reuse component already added onto it, and you could just be adding some storage. So think, you're going to come build some of these tanks to store your reuse water, and you might be able to sell that or distribute it to other local people and sell it. Thinking about if you've got an industrial plant, I talk about this, if you've got an industrial wastewater plant, you might be able to convert that to a 210E permit, which is an exemption for industrial users, and add a reuse component onto the back end of your plant. And then add some sort of storage tank. You can now take this water, sell it for construction. Think like watering different irrigation areas. You could reuse it in your processes, and those are going to be a lot more expensive. Adding on that third step, that's why I put like $500,000 is really where you're going to start when you have all your planning costs and infrastructure costs considered, all the way up to I could see that being $1.5 million. If you've got a really big plant, then it might be more than $1.5 million. A little more robust would be starting from scratch. So you got a development, and you're wanting to go in for some sort of reuse permit. So say I want to get purple pipe, and I want to I've got soccer fields and farmers near me, and I can send the water there and a land apply via irrigation my wastewater effluent, and it'll support something like 1,000 community development. Maybe you got some commercial stores, things like that, and you're setting up something in the 100,000 gallons higher range. It's more of a complicated network overall. You could even have a loading station to sell that reuse water. I put 1.5 million. Really, the scenario I'm talking about is like it's going to be closer to a $5 or $10 million investment up front, or not up front, but total into this project. I'm seeing a lot in the Austin area coming up with some reuses. It's becoming bigger and bigger. So I just wanted to like touch more on the revenue potential. What could you do with this reuse water that you're building off this? You're building the Senate bill, and you're setting that up. You got this reuse. Now, what do I do with it? How do I make some money back? So I did a little bit of research. What and who could use reuse water, and how could you do it? And I'm just trying to spin some ideas for you. There's a lot of temporary water needs for dust control, grading compaction. Might need it for just general construction water. I see some of that. And I'm seeing bulk rates go at the $5 to $15 per 1,000 gallons sold. So, you're pulling up with a truck, your pumper truck, maybe it's a couple thousand gallons. You're paying $30, $40, and you're driving away. Some other stuff, think irrigation, so crops, golf courses, lawns, baseball fields, soccer fields, football fields. Think anything like open space like that or crop usage, you would be able to apply some of that reuse water there, and also sell it at that same $5 to $15 per 1,000. And then you could sell your water to, and I'm seeing this now, these data centers need a lot of cooling water and they need a lot of treatment. And I'm seeing these recycle systems being proposed between these data centers that have huge needs and wastewater plants adjacent. They're trying to essentially scalp the water. Scalp meaning they're trying to pull it off the line and take it in. Energy production like cooling, and maybe some other manufacturing processes. So what are your next steps? You're probably going to want to look at, setting up, with your finance wizards. Everyone's probably got one, or you're that person, is kind of plugging and playing some of these loan rates and stuff that you can go find on their website, and start working with an engineer and start just estimate, just kind of estimate with some life cycle analysis. Look and see what kind of soils you've got around the site and see if you can land apply, because that's going to be where your biggest application is going to be, most likely, or the most common. If that starts to work out, think about setting up your entity. Get with a mud attorney. I don't have one to recommend at this webinar. And make sure, if you're looking at getting funding through Senate Bill 7 and the Texas Water Board, that's a critical component. And then, you're probably going to want to work with someone who's pretty qualified in setting up these applications. Engineering firms like ourselves. There's like grant writers and loan preparation people who are, they spearhead the whole project and work with engineers to get all these calcs and back end documents as well. Let's see, and then you go for the loan, you get your permits, whether it's at the county, this is probably not the city, it's probably county level, TCEQ level, you go get through those, take your project out to bid. Maybe you're the person building it. I know a lot of developers are also builders. They've got all the crews and everything, which is a huge cost savings when setting this up. So I would make a pitch. You should consider us in helping. I've done lots of webinars and stuff with the Texas Water Board. I know a lot of their staff, as well as TCEQ, constantly emailing and chatting with them. And we can really help bring a lot of those services, less the mud attorney, kind of under one roof. And so anyway, I just kind of hammering it back together, working with us. You're going to have, like I said, we got the relationship with the board members. We're going to help bring kind of everything under one roof for you. And it's just going to help lower your risk working with someone who's worked with these individuals before. So here's our number. Here's my email. If you like this webinar, go ahead, reach out, and let me know if you're interested. Thank you for listening, and hopefully I gave you something useful here.